What's up, YouTube? My name is Batman, and this is one of those matches that goes right down to the wire. You could call it a hard-fought match, a close match, whatever you want to call it. I was rolling with my party. I think I had 3 guys with me, and we ran into another full party. And whenever that happens, there's going to be shit talking, and they called us, chicken fuckers, and we called them prick-eating twat lovers and shit like that. And so, needless to say, things got a little heated, and the match ended up being pretty fierce. And that's kind of what I think makes Call of Duty great, is competitive matches like this. Oh, right here. Okay, you see this? Like, 3 or 4 times in this video, you'll see where I get a double or a triple spray because they were, coordinating, and they decided, oh, let's get 2 or 3 guys on the flag at the same time. We'll take it hella quick. And that's a great idea unless somebody like me just comes and sprays you all down. You want to make sure that you're jumping on the flag, but instead of just all jumping on the flag at the same time, maybe consider one person jumping on the flag, the other 2 kind of watching, directions from which the enemy could come. That's something to keep in mind, and it's one of the things that probably let us win this match, is that these guys were not capping flags in a safe way. They were just kind of not haphazardly, but aggressively jumping on them and then getting shit on by me. And this is a competitive match, not in the sense that it's GB or anything like that, but it's not one of those matches where we get the double cap and then we just spawn trap the whole game and I go 50-5 or whatever. Going 50-5 on a bunch of 5-year-olds is tight shit, but it can get old really quick. Because once you get on a roll and you start doing a lot, here's another one of those triple sprays I was talking about. Once you get on a roll and you start doing it a lot, it loses its appeal, because it's like masturbation. If you do it a lot, it starts to feel not as great the more you do it. If you're doing it 2 times a day for a week, it's not going to feel as good as if you were doing it like once a week and it's just like that magical whack off. And it's the same way with Call of Duty games. Going 50-5 is great. You get that adrenaline rush, you're pumped, you're feeling it. But it's not so great if it's like the 10th game in the row and it becomes sort of second nature. You're just like, yeah, I know I'm going to do really well, I have my team with me. It loses its excitement. Anytime something becomes familiar, anytime something becomes oversaturated, it's not going to be, individually, they're not going to feel as special. And so that's kind of what leads a lot of players to play GB and things like that. Because people love a challenge, they want competition. Mankind loves to compete. I don't think anyone can dispute that. Men in particular. I think women make just as great fighters, but they don't get the same sort of perverted satisfaction that we do out of, fighting and victory and things like that. Most of the time, anyways. But, that's what makes things like sports so popular, competitive sports like football and shit like that, because it's a competition and we love to compete. Anyone who doesn't think we love to compete need only take a basic, military history class, or just a psychological history class, or any kind of history class, and you'll pretty much come to the same conclusion. Mankind loves to compete. My football coach, he even called football was organized fighting, because that's what it is. You line up all next to each other, and then you fucking duke it out, and if you injure someone on the other team, you don't act like a prick about it, but you're not sorry either. Later in the locker room, you're going to joke about it, because there's something cool about it. I don't know why it's fun to injure someone on the enemy team in football, but I know, I've done it before. I've seen friends do it before, and you don't go, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You don't go, oh, I made a mistake. You don't go, oh, I feel bad about that. You go, yeah, I took one of their starting players off the fucking team. It's going to make it that much easier for us to win now, because that's what matters. Winning over that person's broken knee or whatever. And that's just the way it is. I think that's how it's been since the beginning of time. But the thing is, things like sports require a lot of sacrifice. Football costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Now that, the economy's down, most of the states are bankrupt, which means schools are going to be bankrupt, which means sports are going to be underfunded. So, to play football, we had to pay, I don't know, $300 for equipment, for camp, to pay the coaches, yada, 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 for our school football team. And not just money, but, time, energy. You got to go to all the practices. You got to sacrifice your body. It's a lot of sacrifice goes into sports. Anyone who's played sports knows that. And so that's kind of what leads people to play games like Call of Duty, because, all that money, time, and energy put into sports, sometimes it's not even worth it, especially if you're not starting, or maybe you injure yourself on like the third week, or you do all that, you get 10, for football, we put all that in, we probably practiced for, over 1,000 hours, you get 10 games, right? You get 10 games where you get to compete with another human being. And so the payoff isn't always worth it. And that's what leads people to things like Call of Duty, because competition is an urge. It's like sex. It's like hunger. You come play Call of Duty because you want to satisfy that urge. Just like when you're horny, you want to fuck a girl, and when you're hungry, you want to eat some McDonald's. You come play Call of Duty because you pay $60 and you have basically an infinite amount of free competition. You can just get on and compete, Get your kill streaks. You know why getting kill streaks is fun? Because you're shitting on other people. Other people are getting upset because you're hitting them with missiles from the fucking sky. That's what makes kill streaks great. It's all about, competition and defeating the enemy. And so the point what I'm trying to get to here is, a lot of people say that video games are bad. Video games make people violent. Video games make people, whatever. They make them too competitive. They make them turn them into jerks. And I just don't think that's true. I think people are naturally really competitive. People are naturally jerks. Call of Duty and violent video games in general is a way for us to quench that competitive urge, to quench that violent urge, without having to, actually hurt people. Because we've always wanted to battle. Mankind has always wanted to fight one another. All you gotta do is take a history class to believe that, to know that. But, over the centuries, we learned that killing people kind of sucks. For one thing, it's you have to clean up the mess, usually. Not to mention the emotional trauma. And so, you come to Call of Duty, and you get to kill people, you get to compete, you get to fight. It's strategic, you're putting your mind, your critical thinking, you're putting it to use. But you don't have to worry about cleaning up the mess afterwards, or going to spend hundreds of dollars on a psychologist because the government can't pay for your psychology even though they put you out there in the war. Things like that. And I know some people might say, well, instead of trying to quench this competitive urge, why don't you just try to ignore it? Why don't you just try to remove it? Because, it's that competitive urge that caused all war and things like that. There are hippies out there that think that competitive urge is the root of all evil. And it might be. I think there are other things that have contributed to the majority of wars, but sure, maybe it's a problem. But you can't just ignore your urge and expect it to go away. Just like you couldn't do it with hunger, because you'd starve and die. You couldn't do it with sex, because they've tried it with sex. The Catholic Church tried it with sex. And what happened? All those priests, all those bishops went so long without having sex that they finally just lost their fucking minds, and hundreds of little boys got raped. So, I'm not sure it's safe to ignore the urge. And I think it's great that we have, violent video games like Halo and Call of Duty and Battlefield, so that we can quench that urge without actually having to harm another person, because that's what it really comes down to. You talk about things like capitalism. People say capitalism is evil. Capitalism isn't evil. People can be evil because they don't know how to cope with their competitive urge. And they do evil things that capitalism allows them to do. But, and then I won't get into an economics debate here. But, and if it's not, if you're not an adult competing in capitalism, trying to quench your urge, you're playing football. People get really hurt in football. People die in football. I've gotten really hurt in football. I've really hurt people in football. And, football is great, but it only lasts so long. People can't do it after they turn 18 or whatever. And so when somebody, and I know it's probably going to be your mom, because I know it's my mom, or your senator, whatever. When somebody's going off about how bad video games are, about how video games are what's ruining the world, I just want to get it out there. I want it to be in people's minds that they're wrong. That video games are what's right with the world. That video games are a cure to our disease, and our disease is a competitive urge. Just like people could say our urge for sex is a disease. Certainly the urge for sex is what ruins most marriages. People get STDs because of their urge for sex. All kinds of horrible things happen because people are so in need of sex. They trade valuables away for it. They make really odd sacrifices because they need to quench that urge. And Call of Duty is the cure. We can quench our urge without having to hurt ourselves or another person. Granted, if you get so angry that, you throw a controller, which I'm sure we've all been there, or maybe you punch a wall and hurt your hand or something like that, there are, potential ways to hurt yourself. But it's not anywhere near as serious as, say, killing someone in a war or ruining someone's career, livelihood, whatever, in capitalism, or tearing someone's ACL in football. And I use football lightly because I think football is also a great cure. But again, it goes back to the point where you can only play football for so long. You can't have 40-year-olds playing football, not even in the NFL. And for most people, once you turn like 25, you can't keep playing football because your body isn't as resilient. And so that's just my 2 cents on it. And I hope that you can now use that argument the next time somebody talks shit to you for playing video games. This is Batman, signing out.